What up? Let's talk about the Los Angeles Clippers and what they're doing because I don't really know. And I love to speculate and figure out why a team might be doing something or just what's going on in general. So now that the Clippers have lost Paul George for nothing, and also lost Russell Westbrook. They are a team that has two main stars, if you will, in Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. And these are two guys who don't really want to play basketball, or it just seems like they don't want to play basketball. Um, Everybody knows the jokes about Kawhi that he just like doesn't want to play. He just like doesn't really care. And as we move, onward in time, it kind of does seem like that's a pretty realistic assumption. And he just misses a ton of games, whether or not he wants to play or not. He's still has injuries and has trouble suiting up for more than 60 games in a season. Like it's just he just hasn't played that much since he was in Toronto, and his career really hasn't been better since he left Toronto. James Harden also is just kind of, you know, people kind of call him a diva. I don't want to really call him a diva. I don't think that's a good word to describe him. But I feel like both of them are just like they're at a point in their careers where they're like, I made my money, I did what I had to do, and I've been a good player, and that's what people are going to remember me for. They're not going to remember me for these years where I was on the LA Clippers and I was almost good enough to, get to a conference finals or, make it to the championship. Like it's just I just don't think they really have that drive anymore. And it would be cool to see them, put something together this year and actually make a run for it. But I don't think their team is even deep enough anymore. So the thing that's interesting is that Steve Ballmer really this one up and like gave away everything to get Paul George. And now they just lost Paul George for nothing after what I think they came together in 2019. So 5 years later, you lost, basically your second best player, or honestly, your best player because Kawhi was never available. So that's a big hit. And you also traded Shea Gilgeous-Alexander for Paul George, along with a plethora of draft picks. So not only is your current team not good enough to win, but your team's probably not going to get any better because you don't have any draft capital. So this puts them in a really tough spot. So if I were them, I would trade James Harden, I would trade Kawhi Leonard, and try to get some draft picks back and just be bad for a while. Because there's no point in being mediocre in the NBA. I've talked about that at length, where being mediocre doesn't really help you, and especially if the attitude of your team isn't right. So if your team is being led by guys who kind of are just there to get their paycheck and go home, even if you draft someone in the mid-first round that has talent, like they're just getting brought up in a pretty bad situation. So you need to focus on switching up the culture, and you need to focus on switching up the personnel so that you can build for the future. Because if you want to ride this out with James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, I'm probably not the first person to tell you that that's probably not going to work. So they got to do something and just figure it out. And again, I think it just goes without saying that the trade to get Paul George is still probably one of the worst trades in NBA history, if not the worst, because of how many draft picks they gave up and giving up Shea. Like, you gave up this budding young talent who is now in MVP consideration and probably will win an MVP at some point. And it was just such a swing and a miss. Like, just such a swing and a miss. And you're just kind of screwed. Like, you kind of see like the Nets dealt with it a little bit, doing the trade for, KG and Paul Pierce back in the day. The Suns are kind of going through it, trading for KD, trading for Bradley Beal. Like, forming these super teams, I don't think is like super useful anymore unless you're literally combining like Hall of Fame level talent like across the board. Like the Miami Heat when they came together in 2010, right? The big three with LeBron, D Wade, Bosh. Like they didn't even win the first year. And they won 2 championships, but like they were saying they were gonna win 8, all this, that crazy press conference or like reveal where all of them were there and they're like, kept counting how many championships they're going to win. Like, that just doesn't happen anymore. I just think there's so much good talent that's coming into the league that to give away your draft picks like that for years at a time is just, you're really, like, messing yourself up for the future. And you always need to be prepared. I mean, this is why, like, Sam Presti is such a good general manager because he just understands the way the league's ecosystem works. And like you need young players. You need good players that are going to develop, and then you draft more young players that can learn from those players that you drafted 5 years ago that are now turning into, all-stars and starters and good role players. Like you need to create a culture from within, and just trading for guys every few years doesn't help you create a culture. Because the culture leaves when you start trading those guys away again, or they go down, or something bad happens, and expectations can hurt people a lot. And when you put 2 good names on paper next to each other, it doesn't always work out because basketball is more than just stats. It's so much more than that. Like it's the emotion while you're on the court. It's the emotion while you're on the bench, in the locker room, how you prepare. There's so many factors that go into it besides just playing the game. And people have different play styles. So if your play styles don't align, they could be the 2 best players in the league, but if they can't figure it out, you're not going to win. So I hope the Clippers figure it out because they've spent a long time being bad historically, and it seems like they're kind of headed for that again, and they're about to, I think, move into their new arena, and this is not a good way to kind of set it off. Just not you're losing, 2 of those 4 players that you guys had, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, now gone. You have James Harden, Kawhi Leonard. Who knows what's going to happen? They're both getting pretty old, and they're already, pretty injury prone as it is. Normally that'd be a good thing. It'd be like, okay, well, our players aren't going to play that much because they're going to get injured constantly. And then at least you could be like, okay, maybe we're going to like tank or just call this season a loss and then we'll get a good draft pick. But nope, you that one up too. So someone's got to figure this out for the Clippers. They got to figure out a way to get draft picks back. If they could figure out how to get their own draft picks back, that'd be crucial. But I think people are going to see this coming, and they're not going to give up those picks that they got from the Clippers. It's a wrap. So, I hope they figure it out, but it's not looking bright right now in Clipper Nation. So, wishing you guys the best.